Well, so the budget is somewhat less relevant. It's really more about the policy impetus that the new government has, and there are two things that they need to do. First, in the near term, finding a way of solving this liquidity crunch that is going through in India is absolutely critical. Effectively, if they don't do anything on this front, the likelihood that growth falls off even further, I think, increases meaningfully. And this is something that they can address pretty easily if they want to. And the second thing, of course, is from a longer term perspective, the structural reforms that need to be unfolded for the India to get to its manifest destiny, recognizing that there's no natural way to get there. They have to actually do a whole lot of hard work in terms of facilitating capital deployment.
There is also a serious farm sector crisis in this country, accentuated by a water crisis. There is a jobs problem. Do you anticipate this budget to be focused on the farm sector? Many people are talking about a possibility of a stimulus. Is there a case for one?
Well, so there are 2 points in that regard. First, I think the farm economy from a political standpoint, especially after this sort of a mandate, is absolutely critical. So I think they want to do that. But the problem is the fiscal flexibility that they need to be able to do that is just missing. Fiscal deficit is too high to begin with. They may get a boon from the money coming from the Reserve Bank, but I think it would be misuse of resources for them to be deployed for this particular purpose. So they will do something. They will do something marginal, I hope, and not go overboard in terms of widening the fiscal deficit. That would be a challenge from a long-term perspective.
On the question of fiscal deficit, if there is obviously the need of the hour, do you think Prime Minister Modi and this government will perhaps sacrifice fiscal prudence for the sake of fixing these problems in the near term? Where is the additional money going to come from? Where is the government going to mobilize additional resources?
Well, so that at the end of the day is the biggest challenge for India, and it's the long-term growth story. It's about mobilization of resources, and that challenge is not going to go away anytime soon. So if you look at the fiscal deficit situation today, incorporating off-balance sheet borrowing, it's going to
delayed payments.
Yeah, it's really high. Having said that, I think in the global interest rate environment, people may be forgiving of some of it, but I think an excessively wide fiscal deficit probably would be quite punitive. So again, the incremental steps that they are going to take, they have to take for political reasons, but they will be incremental rather than substantial.
What can the market be excited by in this budget?
Well, again, I don't think there's going to be a lot that the markets are going to get excited about in the budget. I think there's a lot that can happen that can get the market dissatisfied with the budget. And I think that's probably more likely than creating excitement.
How are you positioned ahead of the budget here in India? Would you be buying India right now? Which sectors look attractive to you?
Well, so here's what the challenge is. Indian markets are very expensive, and especially the markets that you want to buy, the consumer story, for example. It is probably the most expensive market anywhere in emerging markets, because that's where people arrive when they get invested in India. But from our perspective, we are really far more focused on specific companies rather than specific sectors. So even in a beat-up sector like bank and finance, we think we can find a good sector or good company that we think will do well. Those are the things that we focus on rather than just making a generic sector bet in the market.
We've been speaking about what the government needs to be doing. What do you think the finance minister should stay away from? What do you think she should not do in this budget?
Well, so the temptation would be to widen the fiscal deficit in a meaningful way. Recognize that while the markets may be somewhat forgiving, I think if you go overboard with that, that would be really a problematic situation. That would be a problematic situation from a long-term credibility standpoint. So maintaining some level of financial prudence. If you count the off-balance sheet borrowings of the government entities and state, but the fiscal deficit in India is quite wide on an aggregate basis. Widening it meaningfully to get political goals accomplished, I think, would be a mistake from a long-term perspective.